Hey, thank you for joining us this afternoon. Today we will be talking about AI, creativity, and the future of human work, brought to you by the Lunar House. I'm Paul Chung, the President of Committee 100 and your moderator. We have two fantastic guests that I will introduce, but they will talk more about themselves and what they do on a regular basis. To my left, we have Rosanna Doherty. She's the VP of Belonging and Learning and Employee Experience at LinkedIn. And then further to my left, we have Michael Dean, the founder of Actors Empowerment Summit. So, Dorothy, Michael, would you like to, Rosanna and Michael, would you like to tell us a little bit more about sort of what you guys do?
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, everyone. Okay. Welcome. Thank you for spending the afternoon with us. I know it's a little warm out there, but we appreciate your being around. I lead Belonging, Learning, and Employee Experience at LinkedIn, as Paul shared. And what that really means is the work I do operates at the intersection of what we call the human plus experience. How do we create an environment where talent is enabled by technology and AI in this moment that we're in? But in meeting that moment, how do we reclaim our humanity as well and leverage what makes us human, what makes us innovative and creative to build the future? That's pretty much the fun of my day.
That's fantastic. Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Dean. Thank you for being here. Andrew, thank you for inviting me. I am an actor first and foremost, and a producer. I started Actors Empowerment Summit during the strikes to really encourage and empower artists to take agency over their artistry. And I work with leaders in the entertainment industry to enable mental health awareness for artists. And we're doing incredible work nationwide. We have a nationwide platform. And so what we do in each city's installations, we do pop-up workshops for actors, we do brunch parties for all union members across the board, with the sole purpose of encouraging and creating a safe space for artists across the unions.
Thank you. I just want to set the scene a little bit for this year. So, according to the World Economic Forum, they cited a LinkedIn report basically saying that workforce shows U.S. will require AI literacy are up 70% year over year. At the same time, we know that SAG-AFTRA is heading into a contract negotiation with studios, with AI protection at the top of the agenda. And for anyone who's following AI, Anthropic, the company who owns Claw, also issued a report recently looking at the theoretical coverage as well as the realistic coverage of AI. And arts and media is actually quite high. So I just want to set the scene in terms of where we're heading in 2026. Now, the question I have for both of you, first, when you talk to any companies, any technologists, the standard industry answer is always, oh, AI won't replace humans. It will change what humans do. Do either of you really believe in that?
You want to start off?
Sure. I don't think it'll replace us. I mean, artists, we're not scared of it. We just want to know how we can be on the forefront of it. We encourage it. We don't know much about it, but we're looking and willing to be able to and be educated on it. We just want to see it at the table. You know, we all just want to see it at the table. And I don't think that we're scared of it. I think that as it grows and develops, like everyone else, we're just trying to figure out how we can mobilize and use it for our better.
I agree with you, Michael. And I think if we look at history, technology has always entered in spaces where we've been, and as technology has evolved, we've learned to do different things. We've created value in different ways. AI may be different, but the pattern has been set. Technology has always created the space for us to operate very differently. And from a creative standpoint, I think, at least in this moment, the technology is not in the place to eliminate human creativity unless we allow it to. But it certainly is in the place to augment our ability to be productive around those things that we happily would give up in order to be more creative beings.
But when we think about, the seat at the table and also about making us more creative, AI, especially the language model and the action model, if anyone remember the game Hungry Hungry Hippo,
Yes.
it's like it just really hungered for more content, more training data. And they're actually training data from creative and artists without consent, right? Who actually owns that?
Yeah, I think responsible AI is something that organizations should be engaging in. I mean, there's morality in everything that we do, whether we agree with it or not. But the rules of engagement have to be explicitly stated and adhered to in order to create fair and equitable systems. In any way that we might look at a system that operates, whether it's fair and equitable in how you attract talent and bring talent into an organization, or how you use an intellectual property as as a matter of course, that in and of itself becomes a new job that gets created, because who defines whether your face is exclusively your IP? If you have a twin, you already have someone who's walking around who looks like you. I happen to be that person where people are always thinking that they've met me before, so I obviously have a number of doppelgangers. But this ability to create rules of engagement becomes an important part of how we navigate a new future. And I think history has always shown us that governance is an important part of how you begin a new endeavor, a new way of operating, introducing new operating systems. I think we can't fear that. If anything, we have to not only embrace it, but move towards it, because the longer it takes us to begin adopting positions, points of views, a way of thinking about these things, the more we surrender the determination around how that technology gets used, the more we surrender the application of that to others who won't always operate in the interest of the creator or the actor, or people who quite frankly have relied upon their ability to generate, won't recognize the role that we continue to play in generating as we go into the future. There are limits to AI. There are limits to technology. I think the fear that we're operating in an environment that has no limits is largely generated when we don't create the limits ourselves. So we have to play an active role there.
Just, to go back in history a little bit, right? How did that pan out with social media, when literally I feel like we have the same fight over and over and over again? Do you think technology companies in particular, actually want a fair and equitable policy or governance structure? I mean, Michael, from your perspective.
I think they do, and especially with actors now, with social media, a lot of what we've seen on our end is just trying to fight for authenticity, and having a platform and having the social medias be able to translate that to the public. So you see a lot of influencers now that are heavily seen and portrayed across all media platforms. And the same thing with AI, it's like, how do we protect ourselves without being lost to the masses? If that was...
Yeah, I mean, how do you actually protect yourself? Because right now I feel like the two camps are, you either don't put anything out or you sue them. Or you negotiate, if you have the protection of a studio, then you can negotiate for a deal. But how does that work for individual creators that need both the visibility to get their piece, their work out to the wider world, but how do they actually protect themselves?
Well, what we've just recently started doing now with the Empowerment Summit is that we're teaming up with US IPA as well, and educating filmmakers, educating artists on how they can protect themselves with IP, and also offering services as to how, if you're becoming an original content creator, if you're becoming an artist and an actor that has now pivoting into this tech AI world, how do you have long-term sustainability? Curious.
And I would actually say so much of this is new. I mean, I happen to work for a social media company, and so the conversation about responsible AI and creating rules of engagement on the platform are very prevalent for us. And I'm proud to work for LinkedIn. I think we do a really good job. And human behaviors are human behaviors. Often there isn't what I would call a perfect dynamic for regulating the things that people do. But those rules of engagement, when applied, actually can be really productive in creating trust. And I think what you're speaking to is really this moment where, as a society, who do we trust and how can we trust? And how do we engage our voices? And certainly that may change from environment to environment, from country to country. But I think we can't surrender our own liberties to be responsible for the kind of environment we want to see, and to exercise our own discretionary voices and action, both in how we're learning to utilize the technology, but also how we're hoping to regulate that technology. I think it's still such early days that we can't act as though the game has been determined and won. We're really in the earliest innings of this process and thinking about not only how companies are using technology, but how media companies are using technology, and how movies will be created, how games will be created, how likeness and image is portrayed. I think there's a bigger voice that we have as, members of society and community, and our biggest risk, quite frankly, is abdicating that voice by doing nothing and by feeling that it's pointless or hopeless to actually state what it is that we want and continue to advocate for those things.
Can you guys actually give, a few concrete examples in terms of how you can advocate? Because I think for a lot of folks, it just seems, who is actually responsible for that governance, right? Is it the government? Is it the tech companies? Is it individual? If you were the individual creator, without the armies of lawyers and without, your campaign contribution, right? From a content creator point of view, how do you begin advocating for yourself? How do you have a seat at that table that seems so far away?
Because what I do believe, so this is speaking as a citizen, I'm not even speaking as an employee of a social media company, but I think very much as a citizen, what's very interesting is that if we think about just the last 20 years, we've seen major shifts happen in society that have often forced either changes in public policy or forced changes in how companies and organizations actually operate. If we think about any number of initiatives that cause the pendulum to swing in one direction, we've seen that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. We saw the Me Too movement as an example. We saw Black Lives Matter. We've seen movements just in this last decade associated with anti-Asian hate and anti-Semitism. And at the end of the day, it's always the voice of society that rises to create a response. We could look to our political systems and argue whether they're functional or dysfunctional, but if we're not involved, if we don't understand what it looks like to be a responsible citizen and advocate for what you want to see happen, then you abdicate the game. You really don't get a voice or a say in the matter. And I think we are at a crossroads in terms of what it looks like to be a citizen who advocates and grows involved in the system. I mean, it's really important that as human beings, we be better students and stewards of understanding how our own cultures have evolved to create rules of engagement, whether it's true of the diverse Asian culture, the diverse Latino diaspora that we're from, really understanding how culture has evolved, and that sometimes you're not building for the immediate moment, but you're building for a generation that may be 100 years ahead. These questions of whether government regulates or companies regulate, they will be debated and decided, but if we're not part of the debate, the decision will be made without us. And so whether we had a point of view or not becomes a very moot point. And I wouldn't say to you, we all need to be activists protesting on the street. I'm an internal activist. I'm not one you'll usually see at a protest on the street. But I think to the extent that we all have to assume responsibility for being change agents to create the changes we want, we too innovate ways. Our creativity isn't limited to the arts. Our creativity has to be active in real life so that we can have the kind of lives that we would want to see for the next generations that follow us.
So beautiful, and I appreciate that you said the internal activists, as we saw through many different models in history, and you mentioned the Black Lives Matter movement earlier. If you're not in the streets, there's many different ways that you can advocate for it. For yourself as a creative, I think silence is, political violence. You have to stand up for what you believe in. You have to have a strong sense of community. We're all more connected than we're disconnected. And one of the more important things that we try to teach and educate at the Empowerment Summit is that you can really network across and build up. You might not be the direct contact or individual that needs to add your resources to the person next to you or to the person to your left or to your right. However, they will know someone as well too, and speak your truth. Speak your absolute truth. Voice your opinions. Your voice does matter. your opinion does matter. It's not just for those over 70 in office.
Hopefully not.
And not to just stay in the sort of slightly negative framing, I want to go a little bit positive framing. You know, AI is also a disruptor across many, many sectors, and
Across all sectors.
across all sectors, especially in the, I would say, in the storytelling and media and arts. We also know that, you know, there are the gatekeepers within, you know, the arts industry and entertainment, and AI could disrupt that. Are you seeing AI going to produce a new world order in arts and entertainment in ways that you couldn't imagine before? Everything from, you know, the talent system to distribution to even, you know, the casting and the how you create.
I think it's already started. I think we need to stay ahead of it. I think we shouldn't shy away from it. I think that we need to embrace it. I mean, right now the Oscars are happening this evening, and for the first time, casting has a seat at the table. And for a while, we were thought, you know, will they be obsolete soon? Will agents be obsolete? Will actors be obsolete? So it is happening, but it's an exciting world, and I think if we embrace it, then we'll all be able to continue to grow together.
I think we can't overstate the democratization process that AI brings. For a long time, people who have been marginalized and segments of society who haven't been included actually now have an opportunity to be engaged, exercise not only their voice but their creative prowess in different ways. And I think in any change, what's really powerful about change is that we all have the ability and the agency to influence how that change might go. Some people grow paralyzed by change, but I think the optimistic part of me says change is really, the moment of disruption is a moment of disruption for everyone. The opportunity is for all of us to enter into the fray as opposed to waiting for determinants of what that change will create to happen because others make those decisions. And I think we can learn from that. I also want to borrow from something that I've seen in my lifetime, that while it isn't a complete victory, it I think is a really great example of adaptation. I was in my early 20s when we first started to see HIV have a major impact on the LGBT community. And at that time, there were so many things that were unknown. And in that unknown, there was a lot of fear. There was certainly a threat that resulted in the death of some incredibly talented and amazing people through that time. And the marginalization of a community like the LGBT community didn't make it easier to imagine. Certainly there were no advocates for the community at that time that I could really remember. All there was a community that was very determined to stand up for itself. And it began to find its allies. And I think about that. I think about what it looks like 40 years later to understand that, you know, HIV is not something that people necessarily live in fear of. There are people living with HIV where before it was a death sentence, and there was a saying that got popularized at the time for our community, which is silence equals death. The community was not silent. The community stood up for itself. The community advocated for itself. And in that process, there were allies. There was innovation. There was a way to address what seemed to be literally a terminal problem in such a way that today people are living extended lives and dying of things other than HIV, even when they have HIV. And that for me is a real victory over a circumstance. And as human beings, it's really important that we not imagine that we are our circumstances. I think it's really easy for us to see challenges like this and feel like we now become a victim of loss of opportunity, but rather how do we reimagine, rethink, reinvent ourselves, unlearn what we've known to be true to create real opportunities for the future. And that's where I think there's a real power of what it is to be human in this moment. We've always outsmarted whatever technology or challenge has come before us. And if we stand before AI or any other kind of technology and surrender our agency, then truly the technology wins, and it really won't matter what kind of rules of engagement exist, because we've now self-victimized and put ourselves in a situation where we don't have the power, the force, or the belief that we can actually create a better society.
And AI does not have the human experience. It has a collection of new ideas that have been introduced to it and data introduced to it, but it can take away a human experience.
As you look ahead, because AI is not going away, what does it look like for the future for the industry and content creator? What does it mean to be an AI-assisted actor? Or what does it mean to be an AI-assisted director? And so that's for Michael. And for Rosanna, I mean, you work in a large technology company, and we just hear so many tech companies are laying off even developers, right? And so what is your message to actually tamper down the fear, right? We talk about embrace, but what does embrace actually look like? How are you helping folks to think about that job transition differently this time around, because it has to be so different than before? It's almost like the Gilded Age, right? Like if you were a driver with horse buggy, your transition is to driving a car, which is very different.
Want to start?
Sure. I'm going to always take it back to community. I'm first and foremost an actor, and I've had to pivot to writer, producer, director, and that's like starting over from ground zero for me. Having to educate myself, had to be surrounded and inundated with other artists that are like-minded, that want to tell stories. I'm a storyteller. And so if AI is coming and it's introducing a whole new set of tools, I need to educate myself. I need to find the experts in that lane. And it's, sure, at first it was, somewhat terrifying thinking that your likelihood is out there for the masses to use, but it's also, change is great. You get to embrace it. You get to create new things. And I think for the actor, for the artist, community, education, advocacy for yourself, and keep going. I mean, there's so many resources out there for you. We at the Empowerment Summit, we bring in experts in AI, experts in IP. We bring in series regulars, we bring in casting directors, producers, agents, with the sole purpose of educating our community. And so education, community.
If we turn back the clock 150 years, most people didn't work for large corporations. They were self-employed in their small towns where they grew up and went to school and met someone they likely married in that town, and they ran their own businesses, and they were small businesses. And when technology started getting introduced, it provoked fear, and people moved from farmlands to manufacturing to a service economy. I have a 15-year-old son who's an avid gamer. And earlier, when he was about 8, 9 years old, I used to worry, will he build the skills he needs for the future? What I've come to realize is his future looks really different from what my future was when I was that age. When I was that age, I was listening to music on LPs. There were 33s and 45s. People were beginning to buy 8-track tapes.
Wait, sorry, I don't think I compute. What are all these acronyms?
Exactly.
What is LP?
Malfunction.
Cassette tapes? Like, what is that? And I say that because I've seen a lot of change, and I've seen how humans can be resilient in the face of change, and we're going to be resilient in the face of this change. I don't think the next generation is worried about AI. They're going to be purely AI native. I have a son who picks up his iPhone, and he seldom ever puts it to his ear. All calls are video calls. He never calls me to talk to me, he calls to look at me. Now, well, he doesn't really want to look at me, he wants something. But I say that because our fears are largely born of our habits. The way in which we've been trained to think, the way in which we've been trained to operate, the way in which we've been trained to do things. We're going to have to do things really differently. It means that we're going to have to unhinge ourselves from beliefs that things can only operate one way in order to embrace and be a part of creating, how might I do this differently? We have to disrupt ourselves. We could wait for companies to lay us off, or we could invent ourselves and build the skills and imagine what would we do if we're not doing what we're doing today, which I invite everyone to think about. I don't think the future is guaranteed for any of us, but I don't think it ever was. And the greater risk has been for those of us who believed, if I do this, then that will come. We've seen people who graduated from college in 2008, 2009 and came into a recession where there weren't jobs. We are now seeing people experiencing a similar fear with AI, wondering where are the entry-level jobs going. And I could tell you, there are going to be more entry-level jobs because those are where we'll find AI natives coming out of school with the capacity and ability to do things using AI versus people who are mid-career or later in career like me who are afraid to try it. I think we need to think about AI not just as technology, but as a way of operating in our lives. And we have to retrain our operating systems even more than we have to learn a different operating system. We have to reimagine what we would do with our time if we weren't doing what we already do today. Like, do I really want to do the 1,000,001 tasks that come with going through my calendar, scheduling meetings, taking notes, then tracking those notes? Not really. And so if there's one thing we can do today, if you're not gaining fluency in AI by reimagining the one thing you could do differently, start. If you have a child, create a project with your child. They won't be limited by their way of viewing the world because they're just going to dream big and imagine how they could possibly do something and use AI to try and create it. You can learn it together. It's a safe space. They won't know more about it than you do, but they'll probably take to it a lot faster because they don't have a brain that's trained around how we're supposed to do things. Their brain is just open to like, how do I get it done? And once we start learning that, I think it'll defray the fear of what happens in a world where AI is going to be interacting with us, and we'll learn to make it a utility for how we create what we want for ourselves rather than fearing it as replacing us. Because I can bet AI is going to be far more powerful alongside of you in how you think and how you walk your days than as an adversary to how you might operate. And the sooner we're willing to throw ourselves in, the more influence we're actually going to have over how AI operates.
I love that, and it's kind of bringing me back to, like, you know, when you're a child, you have that childlike wonder, and you're ambitious and you're adventurous, and then you become an adult and everything gets fucked up. No, sorry. You get in your head, you overanalyze and all that. I mean,
all those promises of how it was supposed to be go right out the window.
Right? Where'd they go? Where did it go? Well, where did it go?
None of those plans work.
None of those plans work. I love that you keep saying disruptor. I feel like, Rosanna, I feel like you're a disruptor. I feel like you're a disruptor in more ways than one. And you had mentioned your son. I have several nieces and nephews, and their norm, they're not even 15 yet. Their norm is AI. I used to be scared of it, to use it on a daily basis, like you had said. Now I've got a master class with these two. They use it for everything. They schedule my meetings, my events year round. So it was really beautiful what you said about it. You know, this is the new norm. This is the future. We need to embrace it with that child.
So
Wonder, right?
to just wrap up, I want to synthesize from the conversation and advice that we heard today. Basically, we are still in a time of transition, and there's two paths we could go. We could be scared, we could not participate, but there's another path, right? A path that engage with the technology, figure out what works for you. How do you build a table for yourself and not wait for someone to invite you, and embrace the different communities that you're in, because in the age of AI, you have to double down on humanity. And so I just want to thank the two speakers for their insightful conversations, and thank you, the Lunar Foundation, for hosting.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Paul.
Paul.
Thank you, Paul.